Now, perhaps the most striking conservatism comes from Joseph-Marie Comte de Maistre, a French speaker and writer, but actually a Savoyard that was an independent duchy in southeastern France. De Maistre was early on sympathetic with progressive reform, but in 1789, the establishment of the National Assembly, which abolished the separate estates of clergy, nobility, and commoners, and then the August decrees, which officially abolished feudal privileges and fees for the clergy and nobility, drove him into opposition. He supported the restoration of the monarchy and a balance of power between the traditional estates, much like Burke, and all within the rule of law. So far, de Maistre sounds like a Burkean conservatism, but his reasoning for all this was far more radical. For de Maistre, all nature is evil and drenched in blood. Humans, like other animals, must kill to live. Nature is invincible. God has made it so. War is a purgative that purifies. One kind of violence can cleanse society of another. He writes, "The whole earth, perpetually steeped in blood, is nothing but a vast altar, upon which all that is living must be sacrificed without end, without measure, without pause, until the consummation of all things, until evil is extinct, until the death of death." Man can only be controlled and made tolerable by submission of his soul to God and his body to the state. The state rules by force and power. For de Maistre, awe is absolutely necessary to political order. This is rather Hobbesian. Power is ultimately from God, and when humans alter his plans, as in the revolution, it can only generate terrible consequences like the terror. He makes this perfectly clear in one of his most striking passages on the executioner. He writes, "A poisoner, a parricide, or a blasphemer is thrown to him. He seizes him, stretches him on the ground, ties him to a horizontal cross, raises it up. Then a dreadful silence falls and nothing can be heard except the crack of bones breaking under the crossbar and the howls of the victim. He is finished. He congratulates himself. No one can break men on the wheel better than I." Now, de Maistre's point is not just that the executioner is proud of such a vile act. It's that the executioner is, well, a regular, normal, stupid man. He has no profundity. He's not even intentionally evil, a self-conscious villain. De Maistre continues, "He sits down to a meal and eats, then to bed. And the next day he thinks of anything other than what he had did the day before. He's not a criminal, yet moral praise cannot be appropriate for him since this assumes relationships with men, and he has none. Yet all grandeur, all power rests on the executioner. He is the horror and the bond of human association. Remove this incomprehensible agent from the world, and order gives way to chaos." Well, the point is not just brutality, that man is a nasty creature who must be kept in line. Nor is it only Hobbes's rational self-interest, leading to a state that can prevent civil war. It's worse than that. Notice the executioner doesn't even know what he's doing or why. He's just a tool. De Maistre's point is that the order of the world, which is dictated by an incomprehensible God, is not rational. Man's reason is puny. Nothing important can be based on it. Power, fear, and tradition are in place for a reason. Human order is impossible without them. This is the Counter-Enlightenment with a vengeance. De Maistre is perhaps the most powerful critic of reason and its expanded role in human affairs of the 18th century. Still, de Maistre did believe in the rule of law and in peace, but he insists the traditional arrangement in which the human being is surrounded by and submitted to authority of the church and the king, both representing God's will and the nobility, is necessary. Without it, there results wild and excessive bloodletting, the price nature imposes for man slipping the yoke, as in the terror. So again, his practical political arguments are not far from Burke, but his tone was extreme. It's arguably one of the features of conservatism that, unlike liberalism, it works less on principle than on attachment to history. Conservatives wish to prevent the liberal or radical principles from remaking traditional society. But then conservatives obviously must differ on what period of society and what kind of society they wish to preserve or return to. As noted, Burke's a conservative of the most liberal modern constitutional monarchy in Europe. But de Maistre, Lamennais, and de Bonald, and other continental conservatives, have a more purely ancien regime, elite-driven society to preserve. So along with de Bonald and Lamennais, de Maistre did speak for a natural conservative constituency that continued to exist for at least the rest of the 19th century on the continent. The combined traditional authorities of king, Catholic Church, and inherited wealth of ruling class, and the belief that those three are necessary to a lawful society. This conservatism, where the Catholic Church was part of a three-headed elite with royalty and inherited wealth, would only really completely disappear in the second half of the 20th century. In fact, one will continue to find the tendency of thinkers and activists on the left, right up to the mid-20th century, to attack bourgeois society as if it were still a three-headed elite, even though that had mostly disappeared.